Good day. My name is Mike Nussbaum. I am a member of the Archaeological Society of Virginia's Maritime Heritage Chapter and a member of the CSS Richmond project team. This past season marks the 10th year anniversary of our team's survey of the wreckage of the Confederate Ironclad Steamram Richmond, a naval participant in America's Civil War. I will be giving you a very brief sketch of the Richmond's history and our initial archaeological survey of the vessel. This will be followed by my project partner, Bill Waldrop, who will discuss the site specifics of our project. This presentation is not intended to provide a total overview of the CSS Richmond and our survey. That would take us far beyond our allotted time. However, should you have any questions concerning our previous work, please feel free to view a video on YouTube concerning our efforts or to email us at the sites listed on the last slide. Richmond was the sister ship of the CSS Virginia, one of the combatants of the Battle of Hampton Roads, which took place March 8th and March 9th, 1862. However, unlike the Virginia, Richmond was built from the keel up, for the express purpose of defending Virginia's inland waterways. During her existence from July of 1862 through April 1865, she became the longest-serving ironclad of the Southern Confederacy. The construction of the Richmond began in the Gosport Navy Yard after the fall of the yard to Southern forces in the spring of 1861. It was hoped that she would be completed in time to venture out with CSS Virginia. However, shortages of iron plate and a lack of availability of manpower resulted in the Richmond only being partially completed when Virginia began her contest with federal naval forces. Though construction continued during Virginia's existence, this effort was short-lived. With the recapture of the yard by Union forces in May of 1862, the Virginia was scuttled by her crew, and Richmond was towed to Richmond for completion. She would become the first of 3 ironclad steamrams in the James River Squadron defending the Confederate capital. Designed by naval engineer John L. Porter, Richmond was an evolutionary naval vessel and one designed for the shallow and narrow rivers of Virginia and later other rivers throughout the Confederacy. Porter's design would become emulated by 7 other Confederate ironclads of the Southern Navy and become known as the Richmond class of ironclads. Undergoing the final phases of her construction in Richmond, she had her rolled armor plate applied, her engines installed, and her crew assembled. Richmond was not built for beauty. She was a brutish, mobile, armored gun platform possessing a 12-foot draft flat bottom, a mix of 4 large caliber smoothbore and rifle guns, and 1 12-pounder mountain gun. She possessed over 27 inches of wood and armor plate standoff protection comprised of 22 1/2 inches of pine and oak mix and 3 layers of armor plate rolled at the Tredegar Iron Works in Richmond. Due to the many resource shortages within the Confederate effort, she was fitted with 2 salvaged engines from the Arctic, an old dilapidated lighthouse vessel. This resulted in her speed of only 4 knots, but this would prove more than adequate for the sandbar congested James River. Though there is no documented mention of their use, the Richmond was also fitted with a ram and a removable spar torpedo. Richmond was one of 3 ironclad steamrams, her sister gunboats being the CSS Fredericksburg and the CSS Virginia II. Each was unique in construction and capability. These 3, in conjunction with the components of protection by infantry, mining of the river, and gun fortifications, were critical in protecting the James River approach to the city of Richmond. In this manner, they succeeded until the capture of the city by land forces of the Federal Army in 1865. Richmond served in various skirmishes, naval operations, and defensive activities during her service in the James River. Among these were the Battle of Trenches Reach in January 1865, in which the squadron unsuccessfully attempted to break through the Federal naval line and destroy the Federal Army's primary regional supply depot at City Point, Virginia. With the impending loss of the Confederacy's capital and base for the squadron's vessel at Richmond, the Fredericksburg and Virginia II were scuttled in the early morning hours of April 3, 1865, at Drury's Bluff. Richmond, on patrol that night, was destroyed at Chaffin's Bluff, approximately 8 miles south of the capital. Though this fanciful print on the left portrays that scuttling, there is little documented knowledge of the 3 ironclads' actual destruction. Virginia II was destroyed by the detonation of her magazines, and Fredericksburg was likely destroyed by burning. The instrument of Richmond's destruction is unknown to this day. After the American Civil War ended, the clearing of the James River in order to provide a navigable river access to the city of Richmond became a peacetime priority. Prior to the Civil War, the city of Richmond was one of the South's largest ports. This clearing activity involved limited raising of shipwrecks and clearing of numerous obstacles in the James River, particularly at Drury's Bluff. This was accomplished through private, governmental, and unauthorized salvage of the numerous wreckage existing in the river. In one manner or another, this effort continued into the 1930s. Both Fredericksburg and Virginia II were either destroyed or salvaged immediately after the Civil War, and the majority of wreckage and obstacles was cleared by 1868. Richmond remained the exception. Scuttled at Chaffin's Bluff, Richmond had sunk on her side on the Chesterfield side of the James River. The particular cause of her sinking is not specifically known. She was set afire and likely exploded, although to what degree is unknown. Noted as lying on her side until 1870, by 1871 she had capsized and lay on her casemate's top. A large proportion of her hull was exposed to river traffic. The slide above denotes that capsizing. In 1871, a salvager by the name of Peter Asserson, under contract with the federal government, bought the wreckage of the Richmond and, using a whaleboat, salvaged the wreckage while fulfilling the terms of his contract to clear her as an obstacle to river navigation. It is known that most of the hull and propulsion components were removed. However, virtually no other information concerning the salvage or the amount of wreckage removed exists. After her salvage, most of the Richmond's wreckage appears to have disappeared into the river's bottom. In 1982, the author, Mr. Clive Cussler, and a group of volunteers performed a brief survey of the wreckage and obstacles in the James River. It was during this time that the wreckage of the 3 ironclads were rediscovered. Due to limited time and resources, extensive efforts could not be brought to bear on these areas. The sites, with the assistance of a salvage sketch map drawn by a salvager named Benjamin Malafert, were visited and observations noted. The Richmond wreckage was the last site in the Drury's and Chaffin's Bluffs area. The wreckage's position under the riverbed was difficult to survey. In 1993, utilizing the Cussler study, a second survey of the Richmond wreckage was completed by the Tidewater Atlantic Research Company under the direction of Dr. Gordon Watts. This survey was contracted by the Army Corps of Engineers towards possible dredging efforts of the James River's commercial traffic channel. Watts's study provided a more extensive archaeological survey of the site and became the basis for the present team's survey. The CSS Richmond Survey Team is an unfunded group of volunteers, professional historians, and land and marine archaeologists, loosely established in 2010 to determine the status of the Drury's Bluff obstacles and in particular the wreckage of the CSS Richmond at Chaffin's Bluff. Its goal is to ensure that the wreckage of this and other adjacent river maritime historical sites are not forgotten nor neglected. This goal is being achieved through volunteer support, but also the generous cooperation with numerous federal, state, and county agencies, in addition to pro bono assistance from private entities. The period of 2010 through 2013 marked the project's infancy. As with many endeavors of this type, it was filled with mistakes, misconceptions, wasted effort, and frustration. However, it was also filled with substantive and quality research, equipment procurement, innovations, and most of all, interaction with varied governmental agencies. The Richmond wreckage and debris field was generally determined and lessons were learned, many of which were learned through the team's mistakes. 2013 through 2015 began the formalized exploration of the wreckage. The team was joined by a professional archaeologist, and it formalized short-term and long-term goals. It was during this period that the first of several magnetometer and side scans were made of the Richmond site by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The Richmond's wreckage lies in the James River at a depth of 36 to 40 feet, 8 miles south of the vessel's namesake, the City of Richmond. The wreckage's known debris field is approximately 100 feet by 50 feet, and the vast majority of this wreckage lies 6 inches to 15 feet underneath the river bottom. Few components of her lie above the riverbed, though this changes from season to season. Various sections of the wreckage are covered by mud, cobble, rotting vegetation, trees, limbs, and man-made debris. Visibility is 0 to 10 inches, though there have been moments when up to 18 inches of visibility is possible. The majority of wooden structure is comprised of oak or pine wood. Her metal components are of sheet, forged, and molded iron, though some copper has been found in small objects. Apart from sheet iron, most of the objects above the river bottom are in good to excellent condition. Wood and iron objects beneath the river bottom are in exceptional condition. Much of the wood and iron appears in generally the same condition as when the vessel sank. There are numerous broken components, all of which appear related to the vessel's destruction or salvage. The majority of the team's efforts are conducted between the first week in June through mid-September, though exceptions have been made. At least one 10-hour day of survey is conducted per week. This day is comprised of site survey by 2 divers of 3 to 4 dives each, as affected by weather and commercial river traffic. Overburden on the vessel changes dive to dive, particularly season to season. Objects identified on dive 1 may be reburied on dive 2. The overall exposed state of the wreckage changes from season to season, each year adding up to 26 inches of overburden. Removal of these seasonal debris and their deposits severely affect the team's limited time resources. Visibility is the greatest challenge for the team. Safety issues in such an environment are a primary concern. This challenge also adversely affects the time resources while on the wreckage. Documentation by the survey team is completed much as any other archaeological survey. Team members utilize dive boards and pencils to depict dimensions and descriptions of artifacts and wreckage construction sites. These efforts can be time-consuming due to the extremely poor visibility and current. In some cases, a diver may not even be able to see an object, but describe and document the site by feel. At the end of the dive, the diver will refine the findings of his initial survey, while the team's second diver conducts their dive. During the period between dive days, team members finalize their observations and catalog the day's finds. In many cases, this will require a revisit to the given site on the next dive day to capture missing information. In 2015, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration provided a magnetometer and side scan of the Richmond wreckage site and the area between Drury's and Chaffin's Bluff. This was a direct result of the exceptional assistance which the agency has provided to our team. In addition to imaging the Richmond, the results of the side scan identified an additional 23 potential targets existent in the corresponding area. Though required to obtain a basic river bottom exploration permit each year, the team was awarded a permit by state and federal government to conduct limited power exploration of the Richmond site, which allowed for power washing and handheld dredging of the designated sites. This was one of the first to be awarded to private individuals with relation to maritime archaeological activities. Private maritime companies such as Abbott Underwater Acoustics and Seafloor Solutions began to volunteer resources and personnel to assist in establishing the particulars of the wreckage sites. The first of these was conducted by Brian Abbott in 2017. It set the technological pace and standard for the team's project. These contributions would result in invaluable successes in the future. These scanning activities will be discussed later in this presentation. This slide represents a sample of artifacts found within the Richmond wreckage site. Description of the many artifacts discovered within the wreckage would require far more time than we have during this presentation. To date, no personal items have been found. Most objects are related to the vessel itself, comprised of iron and wooden objects. Object size ranged between a small scrap of possible copper sheathing to extremely large wooden beams and planking. Mechanical objects have been primarily located in the downriver end of the vessel, likely indicating its stern. Armor plate, both in 1-inch and 2-inch thicknesses, can be found throughout the wreckage. Loose plate is likely due to salvage efforts. Substantive armor plate remains intact on the vessel's casemated shield, of which one 44-foot section is exposed. Probing has recently determined a previously undiscovered area of at least 70 feet of armor plate, which will be discussed later in this presentation. It must be emphasized that all objects were examined and replaced within the restrictions of our permit and the ethics of maritime archaeology. All of these objects were replaced exactly in the same positions and environment in which they were found. No items related to the Richmond have been permanently removed. This slide denotes survey exploration areas on the Richmond wreckage from 2010 to the present. This outline shown in the slide above denotes the Richmond class of ironclads as designed by John Porter. There are no existing blueprints, first-hand sketches, or photographs of the Richmond. In addition, there is no documentation of the Asserson salvage of the Richmond in the early 1870s. Thereby, the team has relied on determining the Richmond's position in the riverbed and water column based on the class drawings and modern-day engineering models. Thus far, these efforts, verified by site exploration, have proven exceptionally accurate. Areas in red reflect those areas surveyed. All exploration has been carried out along the surface of the river bottom relating to exposed wreckage. The blue area represents the gap, an area in which the casemate appears to have been broken, either during the vessel's scuttling or salvage. Numerous artifacts have been documented in this area. The 2020 season ended with the discovery of an area of extensive wreckage, previously unknown, 40 feet downriver from the established, determined boundaries of the wreckage. This find, as with other structural discoveries, will be discussed by my project partner, Bill Waldrop.
Hello everyone, my name is Bill Waldrop and I am the other half of this team. Since Mike has provided you with an excellent overall introduction to our project, I will focus on more detailed information about the ship itself. You will learn about her construction, her present condition, some of our greatest discoveries, and even view underwater video of areas not seen by the human eye since the night of April 2nd, 1865. Having said that, let's begin with this drawing of her interior and layout. The casemate refers to her armored shield above the waterline that protects the men at her cannons. The gun deck is her main deck above the waterline, and much of it is within the casemate. The berth deck is below that, with the hold deck being the bottom of the ship. This cross-sectional view will familiarize you with terms you will hear throughout this presentation. The knuckle is a heavily constructed edge protecting the hull from ramming by enemy vessels as well as cannon fire. The smoke pipe base connects the boilers to the smoke pipe and is a prominent feature on the wreck site. The shield or roof are the other names for the slope protective wall of the casemate. This image shows you the approximate area, lined in red, where we have done most of our exploration since 2012. Superimposed within it are features from the next slide. We have focused mainly on this area since it has the least amount of overburden. The rest of the wreck is covered with mud and all the debris that floats downriver from Richmond and hangs up on her. In this drawing can be seen the partially exposed framing timbers, smokestack base, hatchway, and the upturned edge of the exposed casemate. At first, we would believe that we were on the underside of the gun deck. An accurate cross-sectional drawing done of beam plus one in relation to the position and slope of the casemate and its edge would cause us to doubt that theory. The timber size of beam plus one confirmed our suspicions. It was much too small to support a 15,000-pound Brook Cannon. This drawing shows the position of those features. Beam plus one was only 7 1/4 inches or 18.3 centimeters thick and 9 1/4 inches or 23.4 centimeters wide. Clearly too light for a gun deck. Winter and spring floods had fortunately eroded away a lot of overburden covering the casemate edge in 2018. We began that season by excavating down at the end of beam plus one, hoping to find the gun deck. I have to tell you that it was a thrill to find it right where the original drawing showed it should be. Note that the brown line represents the river bottom and the dashed red and brown lines represent the area where we removed the overburden. The long buried timbers were in excellent condition, and we found that the gun deck beam had deck planking fastened on the underside, with its end resting on the waterway. The hull frames and planking had been torn off, leaving only the whale fastened to the casemate. Most interesting of all was a solid iron cylindrical object passing through a huge timber. We both wondered what the purpose was for this feature. In this plan view, you can see these timbers from above, along with the mysterious iron object. It leans a little towards the gun deck beam and is actually crushed somewhat into its side. There was some clearance around it as though it was meant to rotate. This iron object has a raised casting on top of it about a 1/2 inch high, or 1.27 centimeters, and is 3 1/2 inches by 3 1/2 inches, or 8.89 centimeters square. So the question was, what on a gun deck would need to rotate? The discovery of this 1864 drawing showing a Brook Cannon and carriage on the Confederate Ironclad CSS Texas may provide the answer. Take a close look at the timber under the gun deck. The iron object appears to have been a pintle through a supporting beam for the cannon carriage to rotate around. It even has a raised area in the middle, as does the object that we found. In this photograph can be seen a full-scale mock-up of these features. My right hand is on the gun deck beam, which is 11 inches by 14 inches. My left hand is on the timber that the iron object passes through, which is an immense 10 inches thick by 20 inches wide. The iron object is 8 1/2 inches in diameter. Our season ended at this point, and all winter long, we wondered if we had been right above a Brook Cannon. The intact decking prevented us from even probing down to find out. By spring, we thought of another, less intrusive way to confirm our suspicions. All we needed was for nature to cooperate. To our great relief, we found that the casemate edge was even more exposed in 2019 than it had been previously. Actually, in this same vicinity, it had undercut the casemate armor plating. We decided to dredge under the casemate with extensions on the intake of the dredge. We began right in line with the iron object and proceeded to open up a hole about 30 inches wide, or 76 centimeters, and around 12 to 16 inches deep, or 30.5 centimeters to 40.5 centimeters. Excavating under the casemate, around 69 inches down, 1.75 meters, we began hitting something protruding from the armored shield plates. Not sure what the dredge pipe was hitting, we began to wonder if it might be the gun port door, or even better, a cannon barrel. We weren't about to go under there, so we came up with some unique tools to find out what we were hitting. In this slide, you will find a couple of them. The contour gauge was held vertically as it was passed down the armored shield, riding along the face of it. Again and again, as I moved it from left to right nearly a foot, or 30.5 centimeters, it was hitting something iron, which pushed the pins in, indicating it was hitting something about 2 inches thick. Once this was done, the other tool was run down with the wooden bar held flat against the armor plating. It would show us what the shape was that we were hitting. This too was done numerous times with the same result. The pushed-in nails fit perfectly against an 11-inch diameter disc. I wondered what object that diameter would fit against. It was too small for a gun port door. Could it be a cannon barrel protruding through a gun port? I took the cardboard that I cut the disc out of to Tredegar Ironworks in Richmond, where they have a Brook Cannon on display. As you can see in the other image, it was a perfect fit. When looking at the scale drawings that I made of this area, I wondered if a Brook Cannon could be laying below the gun deck beam and planking. As this drawing shows, it could be possible. So the challenge was, how do we prove it? Mike and I both knew that a picture was worth 1,000 words, so we each came up with our own devices to do so. Note the area in the drawing that shows the sand. It became our enemy, but also gave us a clue. These are the methods we used to shoot video down in the hole. Mike mounted his GoPro camera and a light to a PVC pipe, and I mounted my Sea Life underwater camera and light to a plank with wheels on it so it would ride smoothly down the armor plate at a set distance from it. We found it odd that we would no sooner dredge out from under the object, and by the time we ran the camera down, the bottom of the hole had filled with sand. This happened repeatedly. As the hole was through mud and clay, we began to wonder if we were in fact at a gun port, and the sand that filled the ship after sinking was now pouring out the open gun port. Even so, Mike finally got some excellent video of what we were hitting, which is coming up next. We're now traveling down the underside of the casemate. There's one of the fasteners holds the plate in place. Another one is coming up. They're flathead fasteners that are working their way out. Those plates are very heavy, 8 inches wide by 2 inches thick. Just tremendous weight. As we near the bottom of the hole, you can begin to see other objects on the bottom. We don't have any idea what they were. We weren't even able to see what we were filming until later. We would be on the boat or at home before we could see these videos many times. So all Mike could do was just move the pole backwards and forwards, hoping to feel something that led him to believe he's in the right spot for whatever was protruding from the casemate armor plate. So he's moving around, and all of a sudden there's this. What does that look like to you? I mean, it looks like the cannon barrel protruding out the face of the armor plating. We looked at, when we first saw this, I mean, I can't tell you how excited we were. Okay. This is a still shot of what was seen down in the hole. It sure does look like the barrel of a cannon sticking out, doesn't it? A couple of problems though. For one, the camera is very close to it, making it look larger than it is. Another is the angle. It seems to be coming squarely out the inclined face of the casemate. If this was so, the opposite end of the cannon would be sticking up above the bottom, and the gun deck, beams, gun port opening, and casemate wall would be destroyed. So what could it be? For now, we think it is the pivot point enabling the gun port door to be rotated up and down, as seen in this photograph. The 2019 season ended with us not knowing exactly what we were hitting, but it had been successful in other ways. Brian Abbott of Abbott Underwater Acoustics and his partner, our NAS instructor, Dave Thompson, had come to Virginia in April of 2019 to use Brian's sector scanner to help Dr. John Broadwater locate other ships from Lord Cornwallis's fleet scuttled or sunk at Yorktown in 1781. They are shown in this photograph standing with the sector scanner. Brian is to the left, John's in the middle, and Dave, ever the instructor, is to the right, explaining how it works. While in the area, Brian kindly volunteered to scan the CSS Richmond for us with his equipment. This would be the first time a sector scanner was used on this wreck, and the results were truly amazing. For us, it was the first time we had actually seen the wreck site in its entirety. In this scan, you can see the smokestack base, the exposed edge of the casemate, and also an area we call the gap. However, what you can't see is the outline of the remaining hull. Too much of it is hidden by debris or buried. Our 2019 season now over, we decided over the winter to delineate the remaining hull perimeter and try a method we learned from sonar experts like Brian Abbott and Josh Daniel. In the upper drawing can be seen pipes set around the perimeter of the hull. We plan to probe around the perimeter and drive in PVC pipes precisely placed at 10-foot intervals. We did this with what I'll call a pole spacer, seen in the images below, to do the spacing, just as surveyors use chain to accurately measure. Each end can be used for the probe or pipe to go through just by sliding a cover over. In this sectional view can be seen the poles driven in at the edge of the existing hull structure. They are driven in deep enough to keep the current from pushing them over. Shown here are galvanized pipes cut 2 foot long, or 61 centimeters, with a wiffle ball fastened on top. The assembly is then coated with duct seal, which is really sticky. Then sandblasting media is applied right away because duct sealer dries quickly. We were told by our sonar experts these would make excellent sonar reflectors. Once put in place around the perimeter, the side scan sonar or sector scanner beams would, in their words, light up the poles as it reflected back off them, thus showing us the perimeter of the wreck. As an added bonus, their software would enable them to measure accurately from the poles to any point of interest on the wreck. We also could use them as control points for the trilateration of the wreck as we expand the site plan. Here can be seen the sonar target set in place. The beauty of this system is that the PVC pipes remain on site. You run a line from pole to pole, which aids in navigating around the wreck, and you need not install the sonar targets until you are ready to scan. Once scanning is done, you take the sonar targets back and you push the remaining PVC pipes down closer to the bottom to prevent them from being carried away during floods. All of these options are necessary on this site. While I mainly focused on installing these pipes, Mike concentrated on exploring the area we call the Gap. Something very destructive occurred here, whether by an explosion when she was scuttled in 1865 or by salvage in 1871. We don't know for certain at this point. When you go along the exposed edge of the casemate, it suddenly ends at this area. It was though the solid 27-inch or 68.6 centimeter thick wood and iron casemate wall was ripped out for as far down as he could dig. In this image can be seen where this area is, as well as a sketch of some of the exposed artifact in what seems to be a target-rich environment. Two of these artifacts were really interesting. One object appears to be a cast iron piece that could have been the very extreme point of the knuckle. Another one seems to be a rack that would have held the rammer, sponge, or worm for the cannon crew to use on the cannons. This side scan image was taken by Josh Daniel of Seafloor Solutions LLC near the end of the 2020 season. Now we were able to see the results from a summer of probing, driving in pipes, and fabricating the sonar targets. It worked. In this image, you can see the yellow dots, which are the sonar targets themselves, the slight shadow they cast, and their position in relation to other features on the wreck, all of which can be accurately measured with his software or by scaling, knowing that the poles are set at the aforementioned distance. Note that the pipes are numbered. The H stands for Henrico County, which is to the north. The C stands for Chesterfield County, which is to the south. 0H to 0C is the axis of beam plus 1, with A being the center of that beam at its pillar plate, and B is the broken off end of beam plus 1. All pipes upriver of beam plus 1 have a plus symbol, and all those going downriver a minus symbol. In this slide, I drew a dashed line from pipe to pipe, which shows the results of my efforts. I was only able to drive in 10 pipes on the Henrico side and 6 on the Chesterfield side. Next season, I will be reprobing and correcting those pipes which are obviously in error. Due to river debris and submerged limbs, etc., it is easy to get off, especially when the hull is deeply buried. Even so, we could begin to see the outline of the wreck in relation to the channel and other features. While examining the side scan images, I noticed something further downriver that appeared to be a continuation of the casemate edge and was throwing the same kind of shadow. Scaling it using my poles, it was about 40 feet or 12.2 meters downriver from pole number minus 5H. Even though we were down to our last dive of the season and it was time to bring all lines and equipment back up, Mike and I decided we needed to take a look. It was literally on my last dive with only 900 psi left in my tank that I found the time to run down there and give it a look. What I found astounded me. This picture is a close representation of what I encountered. Once I was at the measured distance downriver from the pole, I moved towards the Chesterfield side as I was in the channel. I first came upon what turned out to be a tree trunk, and when I reached over it to feel what was on the other side, I felt iron armor plates lying flat, side by side, and their ends were not only cut and at an angle, but beveled as well. I believe that due to the distance downriver, I must be at the armored flat deck aft of the casemate. There were iron pins sticking up, indicating that they were attached to wooden timbers as they would be. As excited as I was and wanting to explore further, there was only enough time to shoot a quick video of this new area, which you will see next. I headed down the line and came to the new area, and this is what is there. You see some of the armor plates, where our line to it is tied in to one of the armor plates. You notice it's beveled on the end. There's the iron pins that are in the end that would have attached those iron plates to the wooden decking. You notice there's a rock in that one hole there. The pin is missing. And here you see the pin going through the hole. A pretty long pin, so it went into a thick piece of wood. And not only is it cut on an angle, it's at a bevel. Move forward a little bit. Wasn't much up there except more debris. And I started counting the plates. There were 3 of them exposed. And dug a little bit here briefly and felt no more right then. They're probably there. Wanting to find out more, I looked at the edge of this. You see a line as though there's a half round piece of iron there. Not sure what that was all about. So I'm looking around further at other things in the area. The armor plate, you'll notice, is very rough. That's because it's exposed with water column. Now moving inboard some, there's one of the deck planks that all these plates were attached to. You see the pins where they're coming out. Moved a little bit further over, and there's some steam piping. That's a T-fitting. It's threaded on the inside, and the pipe is about 10 foot long. But about this time I began to realize I am really low on air, and a quick check of my gauges told me that once again another season had ended. Although the diving season had ended with the advent of colder weather, our evaluation of the new data obtained and future planning had just begun. The image you see before you now is the product of that evaluation and speaks volumes about the value of teamwork. Mike used several of Josh Daniels' scans in a special graphics program to do an overlay on them of Porter and Meagher's drawings of the ship. To do this as accurately as possible, scaling is everything. Josh taught us how to adjust slant range and speed correction to obtain accurate scaling from the imagery. My placing the sonar targets at exact distances, along with 3 common points shown on both the drawings and the scans, enabled Mike to place the overlay of Porter's and Meagher's drawing onto the scan with a moderate degree of accuracy. We now have a new focus for the team's efforts in 2021, which is threefold: to find the downriver pointed end of the wreck, to determine if it's the bow or stern, and to establish the centerline axis of the ship. For more information on the CSS Richmond and the survey work accomplished by our team, please go to youtube.com and search under CSS Richmond to find our video. Should you have any more questions, please feel free to contact us at the email addresses listed. Thank you.